The 6th of June, 1944, 5:30 hours, Normandy coast. Oberleutnant Petre of the German 352nd Infantry Division stands at the edge of the precipice, looking down at the churning gray Atlantic. He is standing on top of Pointe du Hoc, a triangular promontory that juts out into the English Channel like a dagger. From his vantage point, the physics of the situation are comforting, almost mathematical. The cliff face drops 100 feet straight down to a narrow rocky shingle that is currently swallowed by the high tide. The geology here is a defender. S-stream, a sheer limestone wall that offers no cover, no handholds, and absolutely no mercy. Petre looks at the defensive layout. It is a masterpiece of lethal geometry. On the eastern and western flanks of the point, two 155mm gun emplacements are casemated in reinforced concrete, capable of hurling high, explosive shells onto both Utah Beach to the west and Omaha Beach to the east. But the immediate defense of the cliff itself relies on something simpler: gravity and grazing fire. Machine gun nests are positioned to sweep the narrow strip of beach below. If anyone manages to survive the crossing and reach the base of the cliff, they will find themselves trapped between a vertical wall and the rising tide, while grenades rain down from above like deadly hail. German intelligence has assessed Pointe du Hoc as impregnable from the sea. The logic is sound. No army in history has ever attempted an amphibious assault against a vertical cliff defended by heavy weapons. It is a tactical suicide. The German commanders believe that the Allies might bomb it. They might shell it, but they will certainly not try to climb it. To do so would require a level of desperation that doesn't fit into standard military calculations. But the Germans have made a critical error in their equation. They are assuming the enemy will behave rationally. They have not factored in the United States Army Rangers, specifically the 2nd Ranger Battalion commanded by Lieutenant Colonel James Rutter, and they certainly haven't factored in the grand deception that is about to unfold. At this very moment, 10 miles offshore, the impregnable nature of the cliff is being discussed in a cramped briefing room on the USS Ancon. Intelligence officers are reviewing aerial reconnaissance photos. They see the scorch marks from weeks of preparatory bombing. They see the craters that turn the moonscape of the point into a chaotic mess of overturned Earth. But what they don't see is the secret that will turn this mission into a ghost hunt. The massive guns, the primary targets of this entire operation, might not even be there. The Rangers are about to launch a frontal assault on the most dangerous real estate in France to destroy a target that might already be a phantom. The wind is picking up, whipping the channel into a frenzy of 6-foot waves. The conditions are terrible for a landing, but perfect for a disaster. As the sun begins to rise behind the heavy cloud cover, the geometry of the cliff remains the dominant fact of the morning. It is a 100-foot vertical kill zone, and in less than 2 hours, 220, 5 men are going to try to solve this impossible math problem with nothing but ropes, knives, and their fingernails. 10 miles out to sea, the solution to the cliff problem is currently making half the men of the 2nd Rangers violently seasick. They are packed into British LCA's landing craft assault. These are not the flat-bottomed Higgins boats used by the main invasion force. These are armored, low-profile craft designed for commando raids. But today, they are essentially floating coffins pitching violently in the Sea State 5 conditions. Inside the lead craft, the smell of diesel fumes, vomit, and wet wool is suffocating. But Colonel Rutter isn't worried about the smell. He is worried about the science. The entire plan for scaling Pointe du Hoc rests on a piece of borrowed technology. A rocket-propelled grappling hook system adapted from the London Fire Brigade. The concept was brilliant on paper. Pairs of rockets were mounted on the gunwales of the LCAs at the push of a button. These rockets would streak over the cliff edge, trailing 3/4-inch hemp ropes and toggle ladders. The steel grapnels would bite into the earth and barbed wire at the top, creating instant elevators for the Rangers to ascend. It was a technological shortcut to bypass the impossible climb. But war has a way of mocking technology. The English Channel is not a laboratory environment. As the LCAs crash through the waves, sprays of freezing salt water are drenching everything on board. The ropes, carefully coiled in their wooden boxes to ensure a smooth payout, are acting like sponges. Hemp is a natural fiber. It absorbs water. With every wave that crashes over the bow, The ropes are getting heavier. A ranger sergeant looks at the coiled ropes, his face pale. He knows the physics. A dry rope weighs one thing. A waterlogged rope weighs significantly more. The rockets contain a fixed amount of solid propellant. They were calibrated to lift a dry rope and a steel hook to a height of 100 feet, plus a safety margin to clear the cliff edge. They were not calibrated to lift a sodden, heavy mass of wet hemp against a crosswind. The science of the mission is failing before the first shot is fired. The salt water is also seeping into the rocket casings themselves, potentially compromising the ignition systems. The Rangers are clutching their weapons. Thompson submachine guns, bars, and carbines wrapped in plastic pleofilm to keep them dry. They are checking their gear, tightening the straps on their helmets, trying to ignore the heaving of the boat. They have trained for months with these rockets. They have practiced on cliffs in England, but they practiced on dry days, on dry land with dry ropes. Now, they are heading into the teeth of a storm with equipment that is literally being neutralized by the elements. If the rockets fail, the backup plan is hand-placed extension ladders. But the ladders are only 112 feet long, and the cliff is roughly 100 feet high. If the boat isn't positioned perfectly at the base of the cliff, or if the tide is lower than expected, the ladders won't reach. The skepticism in the boat is palpable. These men are elite volunteers, but they are not suicidal. They know that if they get to the bottom of that cliff and the ropes don't fly, they will be sitting ducks for the Germans above. The technological advantage that was supposed to equalize the fight is dissolving in the salt spray. The mission is shifting from a calculated military operation to a raw test of human endurance. And the worst part is, they are heading towards the wrong landmark. 6:30 hours the approach. The flotilla of 10 LCAs is struggling against a strong tidal current running east to west. In the lead boat, Colonel Rudder stands next to the British coxswain, squinting through the spray and smoke. The coastline is a smudge of gray and brown, obscured by the massive naval bombardment that has been pounding the shore since dawn. Suddenly, Rudder realizes something is wrong. The silhouette of the cliff ahead doesn't match the reconnaissance photos he has memorized. The prominent jagged edge of Pointe du Hoc is missing. Instead, they are heading towards Pointe de la Perque, a cliff formation 3 miles to the east of their target. The British coxswain, fighting the heavy seas and the disorientation caused by the smoke, has drifted off course. Rudder screams over the roar of the engines and the explosions, ordering a hard starboard turn. He corrects the course, pointing the nose of the boat back towards the west, towards the true target. But this correction comes with a terrible price. By turning west to correct their mistake, the Rangers are now forced to sail parallel to the coastline for 3 agonizing miles. In naval warfare, this is known as unmasking. Instead of approaching the enemy head-on, presenting a small target, they are now exposing the broadsides of their boats to the German defenses. They have turned a surprise attack into a parade. The Germans on the cliff top at Pointe du Hoc watch in disbelief. They see the American boats turn and begin their slow, struggling run along the coast. The element of surprise is gone. The 352nd Infantry Division gunners adjust their sights. The impossible attack is no longer a secret. It is a target practice session. The death run begins for 40 minutes. The Rangers are subjected to withering fire from the cliffs. Machine gun bullets whip the water into a froth around the boats. 20mm anti-aircraft guns depressed to fire at surface targets begin to tear chunks out of the armored sides of the LCAs inside the boats. The sound is deafening. The hammer, blows of bullets striking the steel hull. The scream of engines pushed to the breaking point. The shouts of men trying to stay low. One of the supply boats carrying ammunition and rations takes a direct hit and slips beneath the waves. Another LCA is swamped by a shell splash and begins to sink. Men are in the water before they even reach the beach. The 40-minute delay caused by the navigation error has another catastrophic consequence. The naval bombardment has stopped. The battleship USS Texas, scheduled to lift its fire just as the Rangers landed, has ceased firing on the cliff edge to avoid hitting the assault troops. But because the Rangers are late, there is a gap. The Germans have time to come out of their bunkers, set up their machine guns, and wait. The calculus of the death run is simple and brutal. Every minute spent sailing parallel to the coast bleeds the unit of men and equipment. The specific timing that was the cornerstone of the entire operation has disintegrated. When the ramp finally drops at the base of the cliff, the Rangers 1T be storming a suppressed position. They will be stepping directly into the kill zone of an alert and waiting enemy. The navigation error hasn't just cost them time. It has cost them the one thing they needed most: the initiative. 7-10 hours the base of the cliff. The ramp of Colonel Rudder, SLCA, drops into the surf with a metallic crash. Immediately, the air is filled with the supersonic snap of Mauser bullets. The water around the ramp boils with impacts. The Rangers surge forward, not onto a sandy beach, but into a cratered hellscape of slippery clay and jagged limestone. The rocket plan has failed exactly as the sergeant feared. Of the rockets fired, most fell short, the sodden ropes dragging them down into the sea. Only a handful managed to snag the barbed wire on the cliff edge. What was supposed to be a mass assault on 20 separate climbing lines has turned into a desperate scramble on just a few precarious ropes. High above, the German defenders of the 352nd Infantry Division are reacting with disciplined lethality. They can depress their machine guns low enough to hit the men hugging the base of the cliff, so they switch to a cruder, more intimate weapon, the steel hand granite 24 *, known to the Americans as the potato masher. The physics of this weapon are terrifyingly simple. A German soldier pulls the cord, waits 2 seconds, and drops it over the edge. It takes about 3 seconds to fall 100 feet. This means the grenade explodes almost exactly at face level for the Rangers trying to climb. The air is filled with the concussive blasts of these grenades, raining shrapnel down on the men clustered below. But the Rangers are improvising. Without enough ropes, they are cutting footsteps into the clay with their daggers. They are stacking up on each other's shoulders to reach the first handholds, and where the ropes did catch, men are climbing with a ferocity that defies logic. Colonel Rudder, the commanding officer, is in the thick of it. He takes a bullet through the leg early in the landing. It's a nasty wound, shattering bone. By all regulations, he should be evacuated or at least stay behind cover. Instead, he props himself up against the cliff face, ignoring the blood soaking his trousers, and directs the traffic of men moving upward. When a medic tries to drag him to safety, Rudder shoves him away, screaming, "No, we're going up." The climb itself is a nightmare of friction and gravity. The ropes are slick with oil, mud, and blood. Men are slipping, sliding back down, their hands raw. Above them, Germans are leaning over the edge, not just dropping grenades, but actively cutting the ropes. A Ranger looks up to see the line he is holding suddenly go slack, severing his connection to the top. He falls into the rocks below. His war over in seconds. Yet, despite the chaos, the grenades, and the severed ropes, the first Rangers are cresting the lip of the cliff. They are not arriving as a formed military unit. They are arriving as angry mud, caked individuals. They vault over the edge, Thompson's submachine guns blazing, shooting the German rope cutters at point blank range. The impossible vertical wall has been breached. The Rangers have paid a heavy price in blood to get to the top, driven by one singular purpose: to destroy the guns that threatened the entire invasion. 7:45 hours. The summit of Pointe du Hoc. The fighting on the moonscape of the plateau is ferocious. The heavy bombardment has turned the ground into a chaotic maze of deep craters and overturned earth. Rangers are fighting from crater to crater, engaging German defenders in a confused, close quarters melee. But a small group of Rangers, led by First Sergeant Leonard Lomell, ignores the firefight. They have a specific target. They sprint towards the massive concrete casemates at the tip of the point. These bunkers were the primary reason for the entire mission. Aerial reconnaissance had identified them as the housing for the 6 155mm coastal defense guns. Thousands of lives on Omaha Beach depend on silencing these bunkers. Lomell reaches the first casemate. He throws a grenade inside to clear it, waits for the explosion, and then bursts in. His weapon raised. The dust clears. Lomell lowers his gun. He blinks, trying to process what he is seeing. The bunker is empty. There is no massive steel breach. There are no stacks of artillery shells. There is no gun crew. Instead, Protruding from the embrasure is a long, wooden telephone pole. Painted to look like a cannon barrel from the air, he checks the second casemate. Another telephone pole. The third empty. The realization hits Lomell like a physical blow. The intelligence was wrong. The aerial photos were a lie. The most dangerous guns in Normandy are decoys. The Rangers have just executed a suicide mission, climbing a 100-foot cliff under heavy fire, losing dozens of men to capture a pile of lumber. But the horror of the situation goes deeper than just a wasted mission. Lomell knows the stakes. Just because the guns aren't fair doesn't mean they don't exist. The intelligence analysts saw the muzzle flashes in previous weeks. The guns are real. The Germans have simply moved them. Lomell looks at his watch. It is nearing 8 o'clock. On Omaha Beach, miles to the east, the main invasion force is currently pinned down on the shingle. If those missing 155mm guns are operational, they could be opening fire on the stalled invasion fleet at any moment. The range of a 155mm gun is over 12 miles. They could massacre the troops on Omaha without the Rangers even seeing them fire. The mission has suddenly shifted. It is no longer an assault. It is a ghost hunt. The Rangers have captured the real estate, but they have failed the objective. Lomell grabs Sergeant Jack Kuhn. They turn their backs on the safety of the bunkers and look inland, towards the hedgerows and apple orchards that line the road south. Somewhere out there, hidden in the green French countryside, the real monsters are waiting. And the clock is ticking. 8:15 hours. The sunken road south of the point. Sergeant Leonard Lomell is now playing the role of a forensic detective in the middle of a war zone, while the rest of the surviving Rangers are establishing a defensive perimeter around the captured and useless bunkers. Lomell and Sergeant Kuhn push inland. They are alone, moving deep into enemy territory, effectively behind German lines. Lomell is looking for evidence. He ignores the sounds of small arms fire cracking behind him. He is scanning the ground. The heavy bombardment has churned up the soil, making it difficult to read. But on a narrow sunken road lined with high hedgerows, he finds what he is looking for. Tracks. But not just any tracks. These are not the narrow treads of a supply truck or the footprints of infantry. These are deep, wide ruts pressed hard into the clay. Lomell kneels down to examine them. The depth of the impression tells him everything he needs to know about the weight of the object that made them. Only something massive, several tons of steel, could crush the earth like this. He follows the tracks. They lead away from the coast, winding through the hedgerows. The sunken road acts like a tunnel, obscuring their view. Every corner is a potential ambush. They are two men with submachine guns hunting an artillery battery protected by an unknown number of German infantry. The tension is suffocating. They move silently, using hand signals. The tracks turn off the main road and head towards a dense apple orchard. The trees provide a canopy that would make anything underneath invisible to the spotter planes overhead. It is the perfect hiding spot. Lomell stops. He holds up a fist, signaling Quain to freeze. Through the gaps in the apple trees, about 100 yards away, he sees shapes. They are draped in camouflage netting, but the silhouettes are unmistakable. The long, menacing barrels. The split trail carriages. He has found them. The 5 missing 155mm guns are sitting in the orchard, lined up perfectly. But there is a problem. About 100 meters beyond the guns, in a nearby field, is a German assembly area. Lomell can see nearly 100 German soldiers. They are organizing, putting on gear, listening to an officer. They are preparing for a counterattack. Crucially, however, the guns themselves are currently unattended. The gun crews have stepped away, likely to join the assembly or wait for firing coordinates. The guns are loaded. They are aimed at Utah Beach. They are ready to fire. Lomell looks at Quain. They have no radio to call in an airstrike. They have no explosives heavy enough to blow up the barrels. They are 2 men against an artillery battery and 100 Germans. But they have the element of surprise. And they have the tracks in the mud that led them straight to the prize. 8:30 hours. The apple orchard. Lomell and Quain creep forward, bellies pressed to the wet grass. They are now so close to the guns they can smell the grease on the breech blocks. Up close, The weapons are terrifying feats of engineering. Lomell, ever the professional, takes a second to identify the enemy. These are not standard German Wehrmacht artillery pieces. The stamped metal plates on the carriage reveal their origin. They are Civdi-Canons D155mm, Grande Puissance Falusi GPF. The irony is thick enough to choke on. These are French guns. They were designed by Colonel Falloux during World War I to save France from the Germans. Now, captured by the Nazis and redesignated as the *15.5 cm K418F*. They are pointed at the Americans coming to liberate France. It is a twisted recycling of war machinery, but Lomell isn't here for a history lesson. He is here to perform surgery. He signals Quain to cover him. Quain sets up his Thompson, aiming at the German infantry gathering in the adjacent field. If they turn around, if just one soldier looks towards the orchard, the two Rangers are dead. Lomell sprints to the first gun. He needs to disable it permanently. But he doesn't have TNT charges. He has to use what he has in his pockets. 2 thermite grenades. Thermite is not an explosive, it is a chemical reaction. It is a mixture of iron oxide rust and aluminum powder. When ignited, it doesn't go, boom, it burns. It burns at over 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to turn steel into liquid soup. Lomell climbs onto the gun carriage. He knows exactly where the weapon is most vulnerable. He doesn't waste the grenade on the barrel. Instead, he places the thermite grenade directly onto the traversing mechanism, the complex set of gears that allows the gun to aim left and right. He pulls the pin and scrambles back. There is a brilliant, blinding flash of white light, followed by a violent hissing sound, like 1,000 welding torches lit at once. The chemical fire eats instantly through the steel casing. The gears, precision, machined to fractions of a millimeter, are fused together into a useless lump of slag. The gun is now paralyzed. It can shoot, but it can aim. Lomell moves to the second gun. He repeats the process on the elevation mechanism. Molten metal drips down onto the grass, starting small fires. He runs out of grenades after the second gun. But there are still 3 guns left. Desperation takes over. He runs to the third gun, grabs his Thompson submachine gun by the barrel, and uses the heavy wooden stock as a sledgehammer. Funden Fuddy Smash. Asterisk, he shatters the optical sights. Funden Smash. Asterisk, he destroys the dial indicators. He is panting, sweating, moving like a madman from gun to gun, smashing everything delicate and vital. In less than 5 minutes, using 2 chemical grenades and the butt of a rifle, Sergeant Lomell has done what the entire U.S. Navy and Air Force failed to do. He has neutralized the battery. The monsters in the orchard have been blinded and crippled. Chapter 8. The powder keg 9 o'clock hours. The assembly area behind the orchard. Sergeant Lomell has successfully performed his surgery on the guns, fusing their gears and smashing their sights. But as he stands amidst the wreckage of the German artillery battery, he realizes the job isn't finished. Disabling the firing mechanisms is a temporary fix. German engineers could potentially replace the sights or force the gears loose given enough time. To ensure these monsters never threaten the beaches again, he needs something more permanent. He needs a catastrophe. Lomell's eyes scan the perimeter of the orchard and land on a large stockpile covered in canvas. It is the ammunition dump for the battery. Hundreds of 155mm powder charges and high explosive shells are stacked neatly, waiting to be fired. The detective phase of the mission is over. Now begins the demolition. Lomell and Quain rig the ammunition dump with their remaining explosives. They set a short fuse and sprint back towards the hedgerows, diving for cover just as the fuse burns down. The explosion is not just a sound, it is a seismic event. The powder keg detonates with a force that shakes the ground for miles. A massive fireball mushrooms into the sky, visible from the invasion fleet 10 miles out to sea. Debris, burning canvas, and unexploded ordnance rain down on the surrounding fields. For the Germans gathering in the nearby field, the explosion is a wake-up call. It signals that the enemy is not just on the cliff edge. They are 40 here, deep in the rear, destroying their most valuable assets. The element of stealth is gone. Lomell and Queen have effectively kicked a hornet's nest. The explosion serves another purpose, one that Lomell didn't intend but is crucial. It acts as a massive visual signal. While the radios are failing, this pillar of smoke tells everyone, Germans and Americans alike, that something significant has happened at the orchard. But for Lomell, the immediate aftermath is chaos. The German infantry, recovering from the shock, begin to sweep the area. The two Rangers withdraw, moving back through the sunken roads, retracing the tracks they followed. They are no longer hunters. They are prey. They have accomplished the primary objective of D-Day's most dangerous mission. But now they have to survive the consequences. They retreat back to the perimeter at the cliff edge, where Colonel Rudder is fighting a different kind of battle. A battle against silence. 9:30 hours. The command post at the cliff edge. Colonel James Rudder is in agony. His leg is shattered, wrapped in a blood-soaked bandage. He has set up his command post in a captured German bunker, using a shell crater as his office. But his physical pain is secondary to his strategic panic. According to the mission plan, the 5th Ranger Battalion, over 500 fresh men, is waiting offshore. Their orders are strict. If they do not receive the code signal, praise the Lord, by 7 o'clock hours, they are to assume the assault on Pointe du Hoc has failed. They will then divert to Omaha Beach to support the main infantry landing. It is now well past 9 o'clock. The Rangers have taken the cliff. They have destroyed the guns. They have accomplished the impossible. Rudder needs to send that signal. He needs those reinforcements desperately. He currently has less than 100 combat effective men to hold a perimeter designed for a battalion. The communications officer, Lieutenant James Aikner, is frantically working on the radio. It is an SCR-300, the standard backpack radio of the U.S. Army. But like the rockets and the ropes, the radio is a victim of the morning's disaster. The salt water has corroded the connections. The battery is weak. Aikner fiddles with the dials, trying to cut through the static and the jamming. Sunray, this is Charlie. Message, praise the Lord. I repeat, praise the Lord. Over static. Sunray. Do you copy? Nothing but the hiss of white noise. Rudder grabs the handset, screaming the code words into the microphone. He knows that just a few miles out to sea, the transport ships carrying the 5th Rangers are waiting. He can almost see them on the horizon, but the electronic bridge between them is broken. Out at sea, the commander of the 5th Rangers checks his watch. The deadline has passed. He waits another 10 minutes, hoping for the flare or the radio message. He sees smoke rising from the point, but without the confirmation code, he cannot risk landing his men in a potential trap. He makes the hard call. Helm, come about. Course for Omaha. Through his binoculars, Rudder watches the impossible happen. The flotilla of landing craft carrying his salvation turns away. They are heading east, disappearing into the smoke of Omaha Beach. The feeling in the command post is hollow. The lost signal has sealed their fate. They are cut off. There will be no reinforcements. There will be no resupply of ammunition. They are a tiny island of American troops surrounded by an entire German division. The mission has shifted from assault to isolation. Rudder hands the microphone back to Aikner. He doesn't say a word. He picks up his rifle and checks the magazine. The 2nd Rangers are on their own. 14 o'clock hours. The perimeter. The isolation is having immediate logistical consequences. A modern soldier fights on his stomach, but he survives on his logistics. The Rangers landed with limited ammunition, expecting to be relieved by noon. Now, 6 hours into the fight, pouches are running light. A Barr Browning automatic rifle. Gunner checks his ammo belt. He has 2 magazines left. That S-40 rounds. In a sustained firefight. That lasts about 8 seconds. The riflemen with their M1 Garans are down to their last few en bloc clips. Necessity drives a tactical evolution. The Rangers stop fighting like an American unit and start fighting like scavengers. They crawl out of their foxholes to raid the German bodies littering the moonscape. Private First Class Gene Elder tosses aside his empty M1 Garand and picks up a German Mauser K98, Reels K rifle. He works the bolt, checking the action. It's a slower weapon, Bolt action versus semi-automatic. But the ammunition is everywhere. The Germans have stockpiled thousands of rounds in the bunkers. Other Rangers find something even better: the MP-40 submachine gun, known erroneously as the Schmeisser. This 9mm weapon is perfect for the close quarters trench warfare they are engaged in. It fires from an open bolt and is controllable and deadly. The sound of the battlefield begins to change. For the first few hours, the distinctive 20 bang, ping of the M1 Garand dominated the air. Now, the acoustic signature of the American perimeter is shifting. The sharp funny crack of Mausers and the rapid 20 burp of MP-40s are joining the chorus. This creates a dangerous confusion. In the chaos of combat, soldiers identify friend or foe by the sound of their weapons. Now, hearing a German gun doesn't necessarily mean the enemy is firing. It might be a Ranger defending his life. They also discover the German stick grenades, the steel hand granate. Unlike the American pineapple grenades, which rely on fragmentation, the potato mashers rely on blast effect. The Rangers learn to prime them, count to 2, and hurl them back at their former owners. This scavenging isn't just about bullets. It is about food. The Rangers haven't eaten since the pre-dawn breakfast. They raid the German canteens, finding black bread, tinned cheese, and cider. They eat in the mud, wiping grease on their uniforms, one hand on a captured German rifle, eyes scanning the hedgerows. They have become a hybrid force, wearing American uniforms, but fighting with Wehrmacht steel. It is a testament to their adaptability, but also a stark indicator of their desperation. They are holding the line with the enemy's own resources. 22 o'clock hours, nightfall. The sun sets over Normandy, plunging the cratered plateau of Pointe du Hoc into darkness. But night does not bring rest. It brings a different kind of horror. The German 352nd Division, realizing that artillery and frontal assaults haven't dislodged the Rangers, shifts tactics. They switch to infiltration. The Germans know this terrain. It is their backyard. They know every trench line, every tunnel, every drainage ditch. Under the cover of darkness, small hunter-killer teams begin to creep into the American perimeter. For the Rangers, the night is terrifying. They are exhausted. Many haven't slept in 40 hours. Their eyes play tricks on them. Every shadow looks like a helmet. Every rustle of the wind sounds like a bootstep. The distance of combat collapses. During the day, they fought at 100 yards. Now, the fighting is at 10 feet, 5 feet, arm's length. A Ranger dozing in a foxhole wakes up to find a shape looming over him. There is no time to aim a rifle. The combat becomes primal. Trench knives, bayonets, and entrenching tools. Small folding shovels become the primary weapons. The sounds of the night are not gunshots, but the grunts of exertion, the thud of metal on bone, and the stifled cries of dying men. The German infiltrators are ruthless. They use the tunnel systems to pop up behind American lines, spray a burst of machine, gunfire, and disappear back into the earth. It is psychological warfare. The Rangers can never feel safe. They have to sleep in shifts, back, knowing that the ground beneath them might literally open up. Flash. A Ranger whispers into the dark using the challenge password. Thunder. Comes the reply. A second later, a shot rings out. The Germans are learning the passwords. The confusion is absolute. In one instance, a Ranger patrol stumbles into a German patrol in a communication trench. It is too tight to raise weapons. They grapple in the mud, rolling over each other, strangling and stabbing. It is a brawl in a grave. This is the siege in its purest form. It is no longer about strategy or objectives. It is about the man next to you. It is about staying awake for one more hour. It is about surviving until the sun comes up. The 225 men who stormed the cliff are being whittled down, one by one, in the dark. And as the casualties mount, Colonel Rudder, still bleeding from his leg wound, wonders if anyone is left alive to see the dawn. The 8th of June, 1944. Morning offshore. The situation on the cliff is terminal. The Rangers have been cut off for nearly 48 hours. They are out of food, critically low on ammunition, and outnumbered. The German 352nd Division is preparing for a final overwhelming assault to push the surviving Americans into the sea. But the Rangers have a guardian angel, a 27,000-ton guardian angel. The battleship WWII, Texas CBB-35, has been monitoring the desperate fight. The ship's captain makes a bold decision. He orders the massive dreadnought to move in. Battleships are designed to fight other ships at ranges of 20 miles. They are not designed to hug the coast. But the Texas ignores the rulebook. She steams into the shallow waters, risking mines and grounding until she is barely 3,000 yards offshore. In naval terms, this is knife fighting range. Alongside her is the destroyer, Louis Satterlee. The destroyer comes even closer, running parallel to the cliff, her 5-inch guns depressing to point-blank range. On the cliff, Colonel Rudder's radioman finally manages to get a weak signal through to the Navy. He calls for fire support. He doesn't have grid coordinates. He simply says, "They are right on top of us." What happens next is a display of firepower that defies imagination. The 5 Texas unleashes her main battery. 10 14-inch guns roar in unison. Each shell weighs 1,500 pounds, the weight of a small car. They scream over the heads of the Rangers with a sound like a tearing canvas sky. The shells impact just hundreds of yards in front of the American foxholes, landing squarely on the German assembly areas. The ground doesn't just shake, it liquefies. The concussive force of the explosions turns the German counterattack into red mist and dust. The Satterlee joins in, her rapid-fire guns raking the German trenches with surgical precision. For the Rangers huddled in their craters, the noise is apocalyptic. The shock waves threaten to collapse their lungs. But as the smoke clears, they realize the German assault has been broken. The phantom guns of the enemy have been silenced by the very real guns of the U.S. Navy. The gamble to bring a battleship into the shallows has paid off. The siege is not broken yet, but the Rangers have been bought another few hours of life. The 8th of June, 1944, noon. The naval bombardment has stopped the German human wave attacks, but the battle of attrition continues. The numbers tell the grim story of Pointe du Hoc. When the ramp dropped on D-Day morning, 225 Rangers charged the beach. Now, 2 days later, Colonel Rudder takes a head count. It is a sobering task. He has roughly 90 men left who can still hold a rifle. And combat effective is a generous term. These men are concussed, dehydrated, starving, and bleeding. Many are fighting with untreated shrapnel wounds. They are functioning on adrenaline and a refusal to let their buddies down. The defensive perimeter has shrunk. It is no longer about holding the entire point. It is about holding a tight circle around the command post. Every Ranger knows that if the Germans break through now, there is nowhere to retreat. The cliff is behind them. The sea is below. This is the last stand. It is the moment where military training gives way to pure character. There are no speeches. There is no dramatic music. There is just the mechanical action of loading the last magazine, the sharing of the last canteen of water, a quiet nod between 2 men who know they might die in the next 5 minutes. German snipers are still active, picking off anyone who raises their head. Mortar shells continue to fall randomly into the cratered moonscape. But the Rangers hold. They hold because they are the 2nd Ranger Battalion. They hold because to break now would be to insult the bodies of the brothers lying in the mud around them. In the distance, to the east, they hear a new sound. It is not the crack of German Mausers or the boom of naval guns. It is the rumble of tanks. American tanks. Rumors start to fly down the line. They re-coming. The relief force is here. But the veterans don't cheer. They have been disappointed before. They grip their captured German weapons tighter and wait. They will believe it when they see the white star on a Sherman tank. Until then, they remain the 90 men against the world. The 8th of June, 1944, late afternoon. The rumble grows louder. Then, bursting through the hedgerows along the landward road, they appear. Tanks from the 743rd Tank Battalion, infantry from the 116th Regiment, and finally, the men of the 5th Ranger Battalion, the unit that was forced to divert to Omaha Beach 2 days ago. They have fought their way through miles of German defenses to get here. They have punched a hole through the Atlantic wall, from the inside out to link up with rudder. As isolated force, the relief of Pointe du Hoc is not like the movies. There are no leaping high fives. There is no cheering. The arriving troops slow down as they enter the Ranger perimeter. They go silent. They look at the faces of the survivors. They see the 1,000-yard stares. They see the uniforms stiff with dried blood and clay. They see the piles of German and American bodies that have been decomposing in the summer sun for 2 days. The smell of death is overwhelming. A lieutenant from the 5th Rangers finds Colonel Rudder. The colonel is still commanding, despite his leg being swollen and infected. The lieutenant salutes. Rudder returns it slowly. It is a belated handshake. It is a connection that should have happened 48 hours ago. But in that moment, the isolation ends. The 2nd Rangers are no longer an island. They are once again part of the United States Army. Medical jeeps rush in to evacuate the wounded. Fresh troops take over the foxholes. The surviving Rangers are pulled off the line. As they walk back towards the rear, passing the fresh-faced reinforcements, they look like ghosts. They are the men who did the impossible. They climbed the cliff. They found the guns. They held the line. But as they march away, many of them look back at the cratered field. They are leaving more than half of their battalion behind. The cost of those empty bunkers was astronomically high. The aftermath. Today, Pointe du Hoc is a peaceful place. The grass has grown back, covering the scars of 1944. But the craters are still there. The ground is still pockmarked, a permanent physical memory of the artillery barrage. The concrete bunkers still stand, staring out at the sea, empty tombs of a failed empire. Historians have debated the mission for decades. Some argue it was a waste. They point to the telephone poles in the bunkers and say the Rangers died for nothing. They say the intelligence failure made the mission unnecessary. But those historians miss the point. Leonard Lomell found the real guns. He destroyed them before they could fire a single shell at the invasion fleet. If the Rangers had not climbed that cliff, those 5 155mm guns would have been operational on D-Day morning. They would have had a clear shot at the packed transport ships off Utah and Omaha beaches. Thousands of American soldiers who survived D-Day owe their lives to the fact that Sergeant Lomell knew how to use a thermite grenade. The legacy of Pointe du Hoc is not about the phantom guns. It is about the spirit of the men who went up those ropes. It is the ultimate definition of the Ranger motto. When the mission was impossible, when the technology failed, when the odds were suicidal, they didn't ask why. They simply asked where. Colonel Rudder survived the war. So did Leonard Lomell. They returned to civilian life, carrying the weight of those 2 days forever. But the story of what happened on that limestone dagger remains one of the greatest examples of sheer human grit in military history. It serves as a reminder that in war, technology, planning, and strategy are all secondary. In the end, it comes down to a few men, on a wet rope, refusing to let go. The war ended, but its lessons live on. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe. There are countless more heroes waiting to be remembered. See you in the next chapter.